All right, I hope you're sufficiently watered, wined, and fed. We're moving on to the next speaker, which is Katie, who's a co-organizer. So Katie is a product content strategist at Shopify, but before Shopify, she had a very long career in tech. She's been in tech for 12 years, both in agency and in-house. Before Shopify, she worked at creating SaaS tools for marketers in New York. And before that, she was a digital marketing and events person for cloud management software in Portland. So long career, and then she's now at Shopify in Montreal, freezing. But she's still here, and she's going to talk to us about UX content specifically. The many ways that content strategy shows up in the experience design. She's going to share tools with us on content strategy. She's going to share useful definitions, and she's going to share what deliverables look like for us. Take it away.
Thank you. Also, I apologize. You guys have seen my messy desktop like 17 times now. So anyways, got the tech sorted out, but just another couple words about me. I'm really into long distance running. I'm doing my second half marathon this spring in Yosemite National Park. I organized a cheese club when I lived in Portland, Oregon. Any cheese fans out there? I love New York. As Shahani mentioned, I just moved here from New York last March, so it's been about a year, but like my heart will always be in New York. And lastly, this is my fourth meetup that I've organized. Before this, I organized a UX content design meetup in New York and a content strategy meetup in Portland and one also in Boston. So I love building the community, and I'm really eager to hear what you guys want to learn about, and that's why we organized this event. I think what we heard a lot at the Mixer in October was that people are looking for some of these fundamental 101 kind of definitions of like what the work is. So we're going to take a step back from where Evie was talking about user experience and user experience design and really focus on the content portion. So today, I want to share with you a few definitions, a few examples in the wild, and then, as Shahani mentioned, the tools, the deliverables, the things that actually come from the work that we do. So some words that you'll hear today, pretty much in order. Content strategy, of course. Content marketing will also be in there for a hot second, but then we'll move on to copywriting, UX writing, content design, and a little bit of product content strategy as well. But first, I want to talk about what content is. And I apologize for any of you who already know this, but I feel like it needs to be said. As someone who's been in the content marketing world for a while before I moved to product content, there's a lot of discussion around what content entails. So I'm going to use Away, a travel luggage brand, for those of you that don't know, as an example. A lot of people think of content and they automatically think of blogs. And yes, blogs are a type of content. With Away, you look at their blog, and it's actually a publication called Here. It's focused on aspirational messaging around travel that ties in very nicely with their messaging around travel. It talks about affiliates and partners and a lot of really great content that ultimately has positioned them in this great place of building a cult following around their brand and building up a lot of hype around basically what is a very simple utility, a suitcase. As Travel Magazine here says, you know, they've turned something relatively boring and made it pretty cool, and that's due to their content marketing. But again, it's content marketing. It is a marketing tactic. So the goal of this content specifically is really to attract and acquire customers and engage them through this content. While content marketing is a strategic tactic, hopefully if you're doing it right, it's not really what the purpose of this meetup will be. We're really focusing on content strategy and some of the tactics of that. One thing I do want to mention, another thing we noticed with the members of this meetup, I want to share a couple of things about content marketing that might be useful or might be interesting to you. If you're really interested in creating campaigns about a product or about a brand or about a concept, content marketing is for you. If the idea of storytelling is really interesting to you, content marketing is for you. And if you want to measure the ROI of every piece of work that you're doing, content marketing all the way. But content marketing is not synonymous with content strategy. And I want to underscore that again. It's not content strategy. It should be strategic, yes. But what content strategy is planning for the creation, delivery, and governance of useful and usable content. And I hope that any content strategist you ever meet knows this by heart verbatim. Kristina Halvorson is considered by most to be the godmother of content strategy. She organizes a conference called Confab, which I think a number of you are already registered for and some have spoken at. She publishes a wonderful blog, and she's very active in a lot of communities, so get to know her name, know this quote, ingrain it in your brain. This is another definition of content strategy that I really enjoy, though. Content strategy is just planning for content. Elizabeth McGuane is a colleague of ours here at Shopify, so this is a great one to keep in the back of your mind as well. And one from me, I would say, in answer to the first question, what is content? It's information, whether that is written, whether that's a video, whether that's a song, a quiz, whatever the format is, it's just information. So going back to Away, to give you an example of content in the commerce world, if you are a content strategist at Away and not a content marketer, some of the things you might be looking at on the Away website are things like navigation. What are the buckets of information that someone is looking for when they come to the Away website? How would they naturally look for information, such as a collection of products or information about where stores are to be found? What user-generated content can be pulled onto the site, and how would we manage that? So you'll see down on the right some user-generated images, and that's one tactic for building trust in the brand. You'll also see opportunities for plugging your brand value prop that the content strategist might have thought of and planned for, may or may not have actually written, but they'll figure out opportunities for where that makes sense throughout the user journey and throughout the site. They also might have done some content modeling. So up in the upper right, I kind of circled where you'll see some of the administrative aspects of e-commerce, so a login. If someone has created a customer profile on your site, the content strategist is responsible for figuring out what the scope of that looks like. Where does that login take you? What information do we need to give the customer and also get from the customer? Another example of content in the wild, gov.uk, people are coming to their site for very different information. They're not coming to look for information about a product, but more about trying to understand the complex political landscape of wherever they may live in the UK. And as a content strategist, you're trying to figure out how can we present this information to people so that they can understand it and also navigate it easily. So in this example, it's a quiz about Brexit, which there's a lot of information out there, but you really just want to know what's important to you and relevant to you. So the content strategist might have decided, you know what, a quiz is a nice, light way for someone to navigate that information. They might have also said, let's put some microcopy down underneath one of the questions to give them additional information and more context, but not take them off track so much as that they're not completing the task at hand. And they might have also handled things like the microcopy, so start now, continue, things like the buttons that you're seeing throughout the experience. Another example of content in journalism, CNN, I'm sorry for the Donald. I really should have chosen a different screenshot. The content strategist behind this might have thought about which audiences are primarily visiting CNN.com. How do we need to localize our content so that in this example you have the US and you have an Arabic audience and your Spanish audiences. And then also what labels are they looking for when they come to the site that can help them parse the information quickly, such as the analysis tag or the breaking news label that really just help them skim the content as quickly as possible and find what is relevant to them. Another one that should be hopefully familiar to most, content in digital products and apps that we're using. So Spotify, the other FI. The content strategist behind this might have been involved in things like interface content and microcopy. So why am I seeing these suggestions here? What are they related to that I've used before in this product? What pages are consistent throughout the experience? So when you click on an artist, what is the consistent information that you're seeing on an artist page? The content strategist may be responsible for creating a template for those pages. And again, they might also be responsible for the actual words at the end of the day, such as play or following or the labels that you see across the top. But the thing I want to, again, drive home, the content strategist is not responsible just for the words. They're responsible for all that planning behind it. And lastly, in the B2B world, this is a pretty complex B2B site around third-party logistics. So the content strategist would have been responsible, actually in this case it was me, I was responsible for figuring out what the business needed to communicate to the customers and what the customers needed to learn about the brand to make an informed decision about a very complicated topic. They were responsible for figuring out the hierarchy of the page and how that's presented to someone. What order do they need to make those decisions in? And lastly, this is something not a lot of people associate with a content strategist, but things like icons. While you're not actually hand drawing the icons or developing them yourself, you might be working with a designer pretty closely to inform what those icons are so that your users understand and can quickly scan the information. One quick note there, again, copywriting is not content strategy either. It's a component of content strategy, and it may be something that the content strategist ends up doing, especially on smaller teams, but it's not exactly the same. In the Shipwire example, the content strategist might have planned for all that content and then created a content development plan to then hand off to the copywriter to write this. So again, it's a function of copywriting. The copywriter is really responsible for building that awareness and creating the story to attract customers to the business and to its solutions, its products, whatever it may be. They're responsible for being the center point for any information from stakeholders, subject matter experts, anyone that has a say that needs to communicate their information there, that person is responsible for. So copywriting might be interesting to you, very similarly to content marketing, if you are interested in telling stories. If you are really looking for a way to write in all different formats, whether that's a website or an ad or a social media post or scripts, that's another thing that a copywriter might do. It's really more advertising, selling-focused content. Again, content strategy is responsible for planning the content. Consider yourself the architect. You're not necessarily the builder. So copywriting, another distinction I really want to make here, copywriting is not synonymous with UX writing. UX writing is really more focused on content for interfaces, whether that's a mobile app or a website app, digital products essentially, and that is something that we'll be covering a lot in this group. Going back to the Spotify example, I mentioned some labels that the content strategist might be looking at. They are really considering the overall experience and how to facilitate that. How can we bring our user through the journey, not sell them on Spotify, right? So it's more task-focused. I also really like this depiction of copywriting versus UX writing. You're thinking about selling and storytelling in the copywriter world. As a UX writer, you're thinking about simplifying and facilitating and empowering. UX writers are more engaging. It's more of a two-way conversation. You're not just pushing the information out. So if I had to distill down the role of the UX writer, you're trying to create content that is compelling, concise, on brand, and very in context to wherever you are in the journey. And lastly, again, I've already mentioned facilitating and empowering. You want to make sure that your users have the information that they need wherever they are to feel confident in moving forward. UX writing is similar to content design. That's another term that you'll hear a lot kind of interchangeably with UX writing. And while they are similar, content design tends to be more focused on web content, but it does share similarities with UX writing in that it's very user-focused content. You're trying to help the user accomplish something, and it's task-oriented. So you might be interested in UX writing or content design if you want to make the thing, not talk about the thing. That's one way of looking at content marketing versus UX writing or content design. Again, you want to help your users move through a journey. You're more focused on the holistic journey, not selling components of it, essentially. You want to help people make sense of the information that they're given. So content strategy for products. Evie kind of touched upon this a little bit. Most of the content strategists you'll meet here at Shopify, now I'm all tied up with Spotify and Shopify. At Shopify, we do product content strategy. So product content strategists are focused on things like microcopy, hierarchy, information architecture, user flows. We're focused on interface copy. I love this exchange. Again, Kristina Halvorson back at it at the Twitter. So these are some names you should definitely know in the content strategy space. Karen McGrane, Jonathan Coleman, very prominent content strategists also. They were trying to kind of distill down what product content strategy is as opposed to web content strategy. And what it comes down to really is if you're thinking about product content strategy, it's more facilitative, interactive, and less about the content and the words. It's more about those interactions and a dynamic sense of content. So just a holistic view of what we've covered today. User experience design is kind of the whole shell around this. Content strategy fits within that to help facilitate along the user experience wherever you may be, whatever that channel may be. And then copywriting is helping to support that with the actual written words. And then off to the side, you'll see I have product content strategy and UX writing if you're more in the product world. I also have interaction design and information architecture kind of like straddling that space between user experience design and content strategy, because as a content strategist, you may be doing that work, and you may be working with a visual designer, you may be working with your user research lead to get some of the data points that you need to inform that, and hopefully you're informing any decisions you make in the design realm with research. So to tie this all together in kind of a beginning to end look at content strategy, going back to the Spotify example, your user experience, if you go to spotify.com, the user experience questions that you might be asking: how do we connect web to the app experience? What things do people need to be able to do between the two channels? How do we tie together the customer profile across devices? What are the elements of a user profile? And when and where can people choose what their local preference is? If you're thinking about content marketing, you're thinking about how do we optimize this for both the search engine and the people who are looking for this product? How do we present that information in a compelling and very clear way? And then you might also be writing this content as well. From a product content strategy standpoint, again, this look at an artist page. I'm very into arms and sleepers right now. What information should be listed on every artist page? How do we prioritize the different types and formats of content within an artist page? And then what are the primary actions that a user needs to take within that page to move between pages and throughout the experience? And as a UX writer, you're, again, writing those labels. So what are the most clear and concise labels that we can use so that someone understands what they can find there? And how will content work between mobile, between desktop, and what does that really look like? And lastly, if you're a copywriter, again, I mentioned different formats. They're writing things like billboards, they're writing social posts, they're writing everything that you might typically find in like the footer of your .com. So what is Spotify about? How do you buy a profile as an artist? What do you need to know as a developer? Things like that. So if you're the architect, what is your blueprint? What are your tools? And what do the outcomes look like? Again, to go back to Karen McGrane, she presents content strategy in a 4-step process. So you have planning, analysis, creation, and governance. So I've listed a handful of deliverables here. You can take a look at this. I have tons and tons of links in the slides, and I promise I'll share them. The first one, under the planning bucket, you might work through a message architecture, which might be counterintuitive. You might think a message architecture is only based on the words that you're saying, but it's actually meant to guide your overall brand communication. Consider it kind of your North Star of whatever you're communicating as a brand. In this screenshot on the right, I kind of have an example message architecture. What do we want to say as a brand in our words, in our design, in things like icons again, across channels? When you're thinking of the analysis stage, you're really trying to figure out what's the overall scope, what are the dependencies, how do we deliver this experience that we've explained. So something like a content audit and an inventory is crucial. You need to understand what you have to begin with, and then you can decide how relevant that is in your experience that you're trying to create. So an example, content inventory at the top, that can take any form really. It should fit what your business is about. Something like a card sort is also very useful to figure out how people would naturally group information and where they would expect to find it. You can do that at the beginning or in the middle of a project, honestly, to validate your decisions as well. And when you're in the creation process, something like a sitemap is very useful to hand off to your engineering team to make sure that they understand what they're building and what the scope of that looks like and how things interact. But of course, also on the design side as well, this is something that informs your navigation of a site, for instance. You're also probably crafting things like error messages that kind of happen in between when things go wrong. You're also thinking about onboarding. How are people getting introduced to this content and this experience? And then lastly, governance. An example of an editorial calendar, this can really take any shape that you want. It could be as simple as a Google Calendar, but just a way to organize how you plan to maintain the production of your content and who owns that and what rules you have around it. So a style guide might be really useful. A couple other useful tools. Brand sort is a favorite for figuring out that message architecture that I mentioned, or message hierarchy. What are the most important attributes that we want our brand to embody? This is a really useful tool from Margot Bloomstein. I've shared the link in the deck, so don't worry. If you are in the world of web content, these are two tools that you should definitely know for content inventories and audits. It helps you analyze how well your content is performing, which is important for user experience, but also for SEO. Both of Screaming Frog and Sitebulb used kind of in conjunction can be really, really powerful. Optimal Workshop is a really great company that's got a handful of tools for information architecture work. So if you're trying to figure out the best way to organize your information, you can do kind of a digital card sort, which is pretty cool. And then also this tree map down here will show you how someone's navigating that information and how successful essentially your hypothesis around your information architecture is. Whimsical is one that Evie presented on, but it's really great for mapping out your information architecture, your user flows, journey maps. It seems like there's really no limit to this. I've used this for very, very high-level wireframes to share with my designer before I really knew how to use some more complex design tools, so it's a nice way to feel like you know design. And once you're more confident in Whimsical, you can move into Figma, which is the best. It's great for high-fidelity mock-ups and prototypes, and everyone at Shopify loves it because of the real-time collaboration aspect of it. I'm having conversations with my designer directly in Figma all the time and like actually making changes to the design that gets produced. This is the app that I'm building, actually, the Shopify email tool. And this is also a source of truth for our engineers, which is really great. So a few favorites, a couple books that are really handy. Again, I will share this. Don't worry about getting them all down right now, but it's a nice little medley of content strategy and UX books for you, especially this last one. It's The User Experience Team of One by Leo Bewley. What I've heard from a lot of people in this group is that you're feeling like you are the only person who knows how to do your job in your company or even understands the point of your job, which is a scary and sad feeling. And Leo Bewley knows it very well, and she's super smart. She's been at Intuit and Forrester, and I want to say Facebook. She's just great. So check that one out. Some other resources. There's a Facebook group of content strategists for everyone. I mean, it's beginner to advanced. Everyone's having great conversations in there. There's a Slack group, content UX, slack.com, and then also the UX blog on Shopify. So that's all I've got. We're going to take some questions. Thank you guys so much.